Hey everyone, it's Mr. Wild194. I hope you're doing well today. I have another book review for you for an author that I've only read a short story for maybe one time back in the day. It was in the DOA, Dead on Arrival, books. I think it was DOA 2. It's a short story compilation of many different horror writers, an anthology, if you will, of just extreme horror, and I love extreme horror. So I was kind of looking forward to this guy. I got this book in particular in a 3-book bundle. One with Ramsey Campbell's Creatures of the Pool was in there, a Deborah LeBlanc book, which I don't know who that is, but that name sounds familiar. I think it's called like Killer Instinct or something. I don't remember what that book is called. I haven't read it yet. Kind of started it, kind of stopped. It is what it is. It wasn't bad. It was just, I didn't have the time. Anyway, so I read 2 of these books out of this bundle so far. Those 3 that I bought at one time. This one is Wrath James White, The Resurrectionist. And again, I've only read a couple of, well, I think it was just one short story from Wrath James White from what I can remember. That story that I read wasn't great, and there's, to me personally, there are 2 types of authors in this world. Somebody who, to me, is better at writing short stories or writing novels. And Wrath James White, when I read his short story, it wasn't that great. It was about an assassin and a big, weird underground sex escapade killing spree, and it wasn't that great. It was kind of terrible, frankly. But I was thinking, you know, I liked his style, I liked the kind of humor he was using there. Maybe Resurrectionist, that was sitting in my book collection at the time, would be better. And I'll tell you out front, I do think he's a better novel writer than he is a short story writer. I think this concept could work better as a novel for this book, but I don't think it was pulled off the best here. By the way, this cover looks so much like a Richard Lehman cover. It's put out by Leisure Fiction, but that cover specifically looks a lot like a Richard Lehman book from Leisure Fiction, so that's pretty sick. The book is about 300 pages, and I really love the concept, don't get me wrong. I think that the execution of this book is such a sad situation. It's a big mess, I'll be honest with you. Now, it's not an awful book. It's very entertaining, and it flies by being so short, or being so decently average-sized. I really enjoyed about 80%, 85% of this book, I want to say. The other 15 or so, it was fine. The other 15 or so, just, they were filler. They had to be there. You know, it's fine. I personally don't like a lot of filler in books. I understand that a lot of people think it needs to be there. In my opinion, it's Stephen King kind of polluting, as much as I love him, polluting the literature world. I think everybody thinks they're Stephen King now and should just write 700-page books for the most slight idea they have that should be a short story idea. This would have been a good 100-page book, frankly. Something like Clive Barker's Hellbound Heart didn't need to be a 300-page book, so it wasn't. It was like 100 pages, and it worked. It was a novella, novelette, whatever. This should have been something like that, in my opinion. It should have been rounded out fairly quickly. This gets a little too big for its britches, I think. So for me, right, a lot of my frustration comes from what this kind of becomes, how the main characters act in the book. I don't really like that. Let's kind of back up a little bit, though, and get into the story of this. There was a young man named Dale who was an odd kid. I mean, he's real odd. His mom gets murdered one night brutally in front of him. That's where the beginning of this book is at. And he basically kills his father, stepdad, whatever he is, after he watches him kill and rape his mother's dead body. And he kills that guy, and he essentially, Dale, finds out at this moment that he can bring people back from the dead. And just anything. Animals, any of that. He brings his mom back from the dead, and the police are astounded. They're like, how the hell did you do this? We saw her dead body. There was nothing left of her. She was cut open. How did you do this? This is an actress or something. They proved from DNA that it was her again. So, we kind of skip throughout time throughout the next few chapters following Dale as he got older, his mom and his grandmother talking about how they thought he was a monster. The grandmother specifically wants him dead. She thinks he is evil, satanic, and I agree. This book has a lot of hate for Christians, and a lot of hate for God, and I'm a Christian myself, so I felt that sometimes. That kind of hurt a little bit, Wrath. I don't know what your problem is. Somebody hurt him, I think. Somebody very, very much hurt him and made him hate Christians and hate Christianity and hate the Bible and hate God. It's very apparent as I read this. Anyway, so the grandmother I agreed with the way Dale kind of is turning into. So there's like scenes in here of like Dale killing animals and then bringing them back to life, killing them again, bringing them back to life. And the animals, and by the way, anybody he does bring back to life does not remember that he brought them back to life. They don't remember that they were killed or anything. And as far as it becomes to our main character, Sarah, and her husband Josh, who are living in a certain neighborhood, and Dale happens to move into that neighborhood, we kind of move over to going from Dale being our main focus and our kind of protagonist to, from that point on, Josh and specifically Sarah. Sarah is awful. I hate this chick. I think you're supposed to kind of, with extreme horror, like Brian Keene type stuff, you're not always supposed to relate to your main character, and that's fine, whatever. This is a great example of a book where I think you are supposed to in some way, but the only character I like in this entire book is Josh. I like Dale in a sick way because he's disgustingly awful and gross, but that's that weird Richard Lehman type of thing. In a lot of Richard Lehman books, he's extreme horror. I don't like a lot of his characters either, protagonist or antagonist. It's kind of like that. As much as I love his work, it's more about the events than the actual characters involved there for me. Or where they end up by a lot of the end of those books. Sarah is just awful. And her being the protagonist instead of Josh just makes it worse. And I understand why she needs to be the protagonist. Because now that they have met Dale, when he moves into their neighborhood, Sarah starts to have these horrific dreams about being brutally murdered and Josh being murdered beside her and being raped and all these things. And it's because of Dale doing it. And it's mostly, she thinks at first, just maybe some dreams about some creepy person you've seen on the street, that kind of thing. He works at the local store and everything too, so he kind of gets her her groceries to her car and that kind of thing. He's just a straight out pervert, and Dale is pretty sick. I'll be honest with you, just a gross individual. The more you get into his head throughout this book and the different things he does, he's disgusting. Now again, this book has a wonderful concept, and I really like where it goes, even if I'm not obsessed with the characters, even though Josh is the only character I like, and he's still kind of bland, He has a really horrific past that he gets into, which seems more personal than everybody else in here, so I kind of wonder if it's Wrath James White writing himself into the book somehow. I'm not invested in most in here. And I will say this too. I know it's a 300-page book, it's not that long, but it's kind of repetitive. It's kind of repetitive. Just to be honest with you, it's kind of repetitive, and it just kind of repeats over and over again. These events of Dale murdering them in their sleep. Maybe it's not a sleep. Maybe it's real life. And eventually we start to kind of blossom out from there and go somewhere else with it. Now, I will say this. There is a movie adaptation of this book called Come Back to Me. And it's great. It's not high budget or anything. It's pretty mildly budgeted. It's a humble little movie. And the twist is pretty much the stuff that I just told you about Dale and what his abilities are. If you had seen that movie and you didn't know anything about the twist or anything, I think you would love the film. I really do. I really enjoyed it when I watched it. It's on YouTube to watch for free if you want to right now. Really solid. I recommend it. It might even be on Tubi, frankly. Really solid movie adaptation. Better than the book, I would say. It needs more gore, but it's better than the book. This book is very gory, by the way. Again, it's an extreme horror writer writing extreme horror. What do you expect? So prepare yourself if you decide to read this. It's not going to be for everybody. It's not going to be for everybody who calls themselves a horror fan, but I think most people who identify as that are people like myself who kind of like the trashiest of the trash. There's not much here. There's just not. We have some cop characters that get involved in the story. That's kind of nice, but not that I really like them. They kind of suck too. Even though this book is a very mixed bag. It's not exactly what I think it should be. I will say this. The last chapter of this book is really solid. It's really, really solid, and I love that last couple of pages of the book and what happens there. That's really good as a twist. Now, I know it's kind of in the film, but it's not as good as it's done here with all the gore that's in this book. I really, really, really like that ending. I think, again, this kind of proves my point. There's so much filler in the middle of this book about, Sarah with some money that she comes into and whatever. There's so much filler in the middle of this book that it just kind of loses itself, in my opinion. I just don't think it really works a lot of the time. There's a lot of stuff that should have been chopped out of this. I'm surprised this came out from Leisure Fiction, of all people. Because I expect a pretty solid standard from Richard Lehman books, even though I've read a lot of duds from him. I've read a lot of great books from him, really great ones that I adore a lot. That maybe have a sloppy ending here or there, but most of the time I really dig those. I'm not trying to compare Wrath James White to his work, though. This is just not, I want to say satisfying. You know, maybe that last couple of pages are, but most of this book is not. It doesn't really hit that place that I wanted it to hit. It is what it is. So I don't really have much more to say about the book than I've already said. It's a little bit all over the place for me. It's a little bit of a messy book, but I really like a lot of it. A lot of it, I would say. The book itself, I almost threw it in the floor by accident. Wrath James White, The Resurrectionist. Have you read this book? What do you think about it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? If you're a horror fan, I do recommend it. I think you should read it at least once, because this seems to be the most pronounced Wrath James White book. You know, it seems to be the one that I always saw everywhere when I was going into Barnes & Noble back in 2013 and 2010 and whatever, getting into reading. I would see this all over the place. And I never picked it up, and now it's hard to find. So it's staying in my collection. I'm going to sell it one day, but not now. Not yet. Anyway, Wrath James White, The Resurrectionist. Have you read this book? What did you think about it? If I had to rate it on a 5-star basis, I think I would give it like probably a 3 out of 5 stars. It's a very middle-of-the-road, half-and-half book for me. It's got a lot of great, a lot of good, and a lot of bad. A lot of sloppy. A lot of sloppy. It almost feels like Wrath James White shouldn't have written this book. He should have paid somebody else to write it, in my opinion. Maybe he should have been like a producer or something for like a TV show or something, or a miniseries on TV. Anyway, what do you think about the book? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you love the gore in here? There's a lot of cool gore in here, too. What did you think? I'd love to see all that down in the comment section down below. Thank you guys for watching. God bless you today, and goodbye. I can't turn off the camera. Come on.